Hello and welcome to the Apollo Awards 2021. I'm Fatima Ahmed and I'm the acting editor of Apollo, and I'm delighted to be your host for our annual awards. If last year required resilience and resourcefulness in the face of crisis, this year has been one of recovery and of taking stock of where we find ourselves. Therefore, one of the great pleasures, certainly for me, of the Apollo Awards is to have a reason to pause and to celebrate the institutions and individuals who have been giving us reasons to feel optimistic in challenging times. This year's winners have been drawn from very strong shortlists. These have been voted on by members of Apollo's advisory board, by regular columnists and writers, and by Apollo's editors. I'm grateful to all of them for their valuable and incisive input. We are also very grateful to Close Brothers, one of the UK's longest established financial advisors and discretionary investment services, for supporting the Apollo Awards this year. As the arts emerge from a period of uncertainty, they need meaningful encouragement now more than ever. And I will hand over to our sponsor for a few words.
Hello, my name's Matthew Spencer, and I'm the Head of Business Development and Marketing for Close Brothers Asset Management. We were thrilled to be invited to work with Apollo magazine on sponsoring this year's awards. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the team and see the talent represented across all the categories. Here at CBAM, we consider ourselves to hold a hugely privileged position. Every day, we help our clients live a better life. We give clients peace of mind, help them realise their goals, ambitions, enjoy their passions, and also look after their loved ones, both now and in the future. This is priceless, and for us, it's a real privilege. Congratulations to all this year's winners and nominees. It's never been more important to embrace and enjoy the cultural achievements of those who bring pleasure in these unprecedented times, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to play a small role in this wonderful celebration of talent. Thank you.
Our first award is for Exhibition of the Year. Organising exhibitions is a feat, even at the best of times, and even more so when museums have not always been able to predict when they are going to be open. So it is cheering to recognise so many innovative and imaginative exhibitions on this list. The shortlist is Alice Neel, People Come First at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Gold of the Great Step at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. Paula Rago at Tate Britain in London. Rubens, reuniting the great landscapes at the Wallace Collection in London. Slavery at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And the Terra dei Uffizi in Tuscany. The winner is a survey of a painter who was relatively unrecognised in her lifetime, but whose achievement now sets her among the great American painters. And it was the achievement of this exhibition and its curators to leave no remaining doubt as to her stature. The Apollo Exhibition of the Year goes to Alice Neel, People Come First, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and I'm delighted to be joined by its curators, Kelly Baum and Randall Griffey. Kelly, Randall, Alice Neel hasn't always been recognised as the great painter that she undoubtedly is, but there has been a resurgence of interest in her work in recent years. Can you tell me a little bit about how you in particular approached this exhibition and the kind of story that you wanted to tell about her?
Sure, thank you so much. We're really excited to be here. Well, Randy and I came to the exhibition without any preconceptions. We wanted to begin at the beginning with Neel, and we wanted to allow her work to direct our own approach. That said, we decided early on that we wanted to emphasize Neel's commitment to progressive politics on the one hand and humanism on the other. We're very interested to explore how politics operated in her art, including in work that was maybe not so overtly political. It was our goal to understand the formal attributes of her paintings and drawings. We wanted to highlight her experimentalism as an artist. And at the same time, to explore the myriad ways, some overt and some more implicit, the myriad ways in which her works operated in a political context.
I would add too that the timing for this project turned out to be right in so many ways, and one of those was the fact that, as you alluded to, there have been Neil exhibitions over the last few years, but they've taken various lenses to Neil's work with regard to subject matter, most commonly. So her entire body of work had become a bit parsed according to subject or theme. And we really felt that the time was right to bring the entire body of work back together and to see what it had to say to us in its entirety. And as Kelly indicated, that humanism, politics, and the commingling of her humanism and her politics throughout her life was what really emerged as a key variable for us, for the catalog and for the exhibition.
One thing that became very clear through the exhibition and through the catalogue is that Alice Neel was someone who was absolutely rooted in the city, in New York. The city was her subject. She painted its people who were her friends and her neighbours. Somehow that made the exhibition, opening when it did, seem very timely. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the reactions you've had, and also perhaps her progressiveness also struck a particular note at a particular time?
Yeah, there again, the timeliness of this exhibition and the story of Neil's life and her art and her connection to New York, as you say, became even more pronounced and profound for people, I think, who were able to visit it during its run. Neil was an adopted New Yorker. New York became her muse very early on. Her art was always coextensive with her life, and New York really was so much of her life. And in the midst of, we started writing the catalog, Kelly, right in the worst early weeks of the quarantine and shutdown of the city. So March of 2020, we were huddling away writing Alice Neel, and personally, Alice Neel kind of helped to get me through this prolonged period, because she's such an amazing example of a person who endured and persevered through so many difficult circumstances. So there was that. Also, the Depression era scenes that Neil painted of New York looked eerily like New York looked like for so many of the worst weeks of the pandemic. So, and I would just add too, that as the exhibition opened and people came into the museum under very controlled circumstances and with masks, to feel the connection with Neil's sitters, all of these faces without masks, was also very poignant. And Neil's work, Neel acknowledges suffering in her work in a very, very interesting and complicated way. And so I think that people felt seen in certain ways, even though they weren't looking at portraits of themselves. But there's that feeling of Neel acknowledging where you are, even in very difficult circumstances.
Randall, Kelly, thank you so much for this, and congratulations on winning Exhibition of the Year. Our next award is for Museum Opening of the Year. This has been a year in which patience has paid off, when several long-awaited projects have been completed at a time when they couldn't have been more welcome. There's an understandable emphasis on renewal and refurbishment, and all of our nominees encourage us, I hope, to think about how they hold the past and the present in careful balance while always looking to the future. The shortlist is Casa Balla in Rome, Denver Art Museum, the Humboldt Forum in Berlin, the Kunsthaus Zurich Extension, the Musée Carnavalet in Paris, and Santa Barbara Museum of Art. The winner is a much-loved institution in its home city, a museum that is part of the history that it was founded to present and display, to the relief of the many people who are attached to its rewarding idiosyncrasies. The museum has reopened, refurbished in a way that makes it more welcoming without sacrificing any of its essential charm. The winner of Apollo's museum opening of the year is the Musée Carnavalet in Paris. Its director, Valérie Guillaume, has recorded a message for us.
It's a great honor for the Carnavalet Museum of the History of Paris to receive the Apollo Magazine Award for the museum opening of the year 2021. The Carnavalet Museum is part of the network of the museums of the city of Paris called Paris Musée. Why is the Carnavalet Museum so unique? The museum is located in the historical Marais district in the center of Paris, is one of the oldest Renaissance mansions. In 1866, while Haussmann was transforming Paris, he decided to create a museum of the city of Paris. Over time, that initial vision of Haussmann had been lost. It had become more or less a decorative and fine arts museum. With the renovation, we wanted to go back to that initial vision of a museum of the history of Paris for and with the Parisians. So, how did we change the museum? The architects of the renovation, Chatillon and Snoeta, have worked on the design of the floors of visitors, adding 5 elevators and making wider passageways and 3 new staircases. The new Carnavalet Museum is set in a chronological order, starting from prehistory to end with the 21st century. We have introduced 60% of new items. We made this renovation for a more diverse audience than before, and we have paid a lot of attention to people with learning or reading disabilities. 10% of the works are displayed at the level of the eyes of children. The explanations have been written and drawn by children themselves. The renovation is very successful. Since the opening in June this year, the museum has had almost 500,000 visitors. I hope to see you soon at the Carnavalet Museum. The Apollo Magazine Award is a fantastic recognition of our renovation. Thank you.
The next award is for Book of the Year. Our nominees include Major Works of Scholarship, Imaginative Works of Criticism, and Elegant and Rigorous Biography. The shortlist is A Biographical Dictionary of English Architecture, 1540 to 1640, by Mark Girouard, published by the Paul Mellon Centre. Francis Bacon Revelations by Mark Stevens and Annalyn Swan, published by William Collins. Louisa Roldan by Catherine Hall Vanden Elsen, published by Lunt Humphreys. The Mirror and the Palette, 500 Years of Women's Self-Portraits by Jennifer Higgy, published by Weidenfeld and Nicholson. Painting in Stone, Architecture and the Poetics of Marble from Antiquity to the Enlightenment by Fabio Barry, published by Yale University Press. And Time's Witness, History in the Age of Romanticism by Rosemary Hill, published by Alan Lane. The winner is a major feat of scholarship that is also a seriously imaginative work of criticism. It asks us to rethink our assumptions about architecture and to find new meanings in familiar monuments. The winner of Apollo's Book of the Year is Painting in Stone by Fabio Barry, published by Yale University Press. I'm delighted to be joined now by Fabio Barry. Fabio, your book is about marble, a material that we think about as a luxury commodity, but you're encouraging us to think about it as an artistic medium in its own right. Can you tell us a bit about what made you take this approach and sort of how far you explore this?
Yes. Well, first of all, let me just say I'm really honoured to receive this award, and I'm very grateful for the recognition. So thank you for that. As to marble as an artistic medium, well, I think you put your finger on it. I remember where long ago sitting in a sort of darkened church in Rome and being exhilarated, looking into the veinings and wondering at the kind of palette of marbles that was being used throughout this Baroque church. And then when I went to look for literature to inform myself about it, I found that most of the literature, not all, but most of it, talked about it as you say, as a prestige material, as a luxury good in terms of conspicuous consumption and so on. And none of that explained to me my own feelings, how people would have responded to these materials in a pre-modern age, or how artists selected them and decided to work them and put them together and so on. And as I looked more and more, I became aware of a current of thought. It's not the only one, but it's a very important one, and hence the title of the book, that goes through history where people think of marble as a form of natural painting, produced by nature, the painter. So I started thinking of it in terms of a medium, not just a material. In the same way, when we think about painting, we don't think about the values or costs of the pigments. We do that too, but it's not maybe the first thing in our minds. And so from that was born this rather long book where once one realized it was a medium, it was a form of painting in itself, then one considered it as a support for painting, then one considered it as the material of sculpture, then one considered it as the materials of architecture and the dialogue between all these art forms that marble as a medium affords.
And now, in the title of your book, the title contains the word poetics, but I think a lot of art historians and people who consider themselves primarily as scholars of architecture might be surprised by the amount of poetry there is in your book. Can you explain sort of what poetry has helped you understand in your research and what you're trying to convey to the reader through your quotations?
Sure. There's actually a fair amount of prose in there too. So there's the prose of history, there's the prose of contracts, and all these things are essential to fact. There's also various selections from pre-modern natural philosophy, by which I mean chemistry, alchemy, geology, and so on. But it's really only poetry I found. The more I worked on the subject, it was really only poetry that allowed one the kind of keenest glimpse into a period imagination, what I call in the book the lithic imagination. So how people responded intuitively, imaginatively, and emotionally to coloured stones and the images, but also just the patterns of their own sort of flux that they discerned in them. And somewhere in the book, in fact, I maybe at the beginning, I say poetry is the hard currency of the imagination. It's really the nearest form of literature you get to a visual artist thinking. And the capacity of poetry to describe this inner life in the stone, which we otherwise struggle to put into words. And there's a lot more I could say about it. I just want to say one other thing, which is it becomes a sort of genre of poetry in terms of Byzantine ekphrasis, but also in the 17th century, in the late 16th century, when this is revived as a form of literature, specifically to extol, to make you see in the stone, but also in the Middle Ages, when these stones are very hard to come by, and even their origins are mysterious, then it's poetry, I think, that really actually keeps them alive as an art form.
It's been interesting hearing you talk about your experience in the church that prompted you to further research, and also the different texts that you came across. For a reader, I think there's a real sense of intellectual adventure. Would you say that's been your experience of working on the book?
When I began writing the book, all I wanted to do was understand Bernini. And Then I went back in time, actually to analogous materials before marble's even quarried. So it begins in Sumeria. And then almost by accident, it has an epilogue which deals with some contemporary artists. So it's taken me every which way, and it's returned me to my roots, actually, in some ways. A long time ago, I was a Latinist, and this revived my language skills, and it revived my interest in archaeology. It revived sort of it seeded in me, actually, an interest in history over very big arcs of time and across cultures.
Fabio, thank you. Your book has many fruitful paths for us to follow that we can't cover in this time, but I would encourage everyone watching to pick it up.
Thank you for the award. Thank you very much.
Although we've been reacquainting ourselves with the physical and the in-person this year, it's clear that the digital world is more important than ever, whether to enhance those direct experiences that we can have again or to stand in for them. Our shortlist for Digital Innovation of the Year celebrates a number of projects that do both. The shortlist is Digital Violence, an investigation by forensic architecture, Majolica Mania from the Bard Graduate Centre, Non-Fungible Tokens or NFTs, The Reasoner Project from the Wallace Collection, Wadston Manor and the Royal Collection Trust, Superblue and Vortic. The winner of Apollo's Digital Innovation of the Year goes not to an individual project, but to a digital asset that has had an extraordinary effect on the art market. Non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, have been around for longer than most of us think, but it was not until a work by the artist Beeple fetched $69 million at auction in New York that NFTs became a word on everyone's lips. Since then, the phenomenon has been likened by some to tulip mania, but not by anyone committed to NFTs in the long term. Here to enlighten us about NFTs is Bernardine Broca-Vida, the founder and CEO of Vistari and Vistari Labs. Bernardine is much in demand as a commentator who understands both art and technology, and her company, Vistari, has been working with institutions to help them harness this new technology. So Bernardine, most of us, I think, will only have heard of NFTs with the sale of Beeple's artwork at Christie's for $69 million, a figure that rather sticks in the mind. But can you explain what an NFT is and what it isn't, perhaps?
Absolutely. Thank you, Fatima. An NFT is, it stands for non-fungible token. What has happened is that cryptocurrency technology has been reused to be able to uniquely identify a digital asset. And by uniquely identifying a digital asset, you can own it within a wallet online.
So this obviously has, once you've created something that's unique, you're making it collectible. Can you sort of explain some of the forms of collecting that takes? And then perhaps, if it's not too big a question, what that can mean for the kinds of art that will be created because of this technology?
It is really inspiring what NFTs are facilitating in terms of collecting, because what has happened is that you can have a direct link between a digital artist and who collects their unique digital tokens. And it is bringing revenue to digital artists who previously could only earn money from commissions or from working on a music video or a poster or some graphic design work. They can now create digital art for art's sake. And it is empowering really interesting creations to start being made. And we're just at the beginning phases of that creativity.
And I'm very struck by what you're sort of suggesting this has long-term implications. But I think because of this sort of rise, the role it's had in the art market this year, there have been sort of, the idea has been going around that this is, a bubble. People have compared it to tulip mania. Can you try and sort of separate out perhaps a few of the different things that are going on? Some things which are short term, and what makes and what's different about the sort of artists that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I think that there are collectors that are looking at this from a short-term point of view, that are speculating, that are taking advantage of the bubble that is there right now. And particularly if you look at the crypto collectible products that are being produced at the moment, that's an NFT boom that, if you look at it honestly, there's not really a sustainable business model in the long term. However, if you pull away from the speculation and from the people who are just flipping, you actually have very interesting art that is being created and a community of artists that's being empowered that has never been empowered before. And I think that, where was I going with this? Let me just remember for a second. So enabling and empowering. I had a specific point. Remind me the question, just so that I can think of what it was.
Yes. So there's a short-term bubble, sort of.
Yeah, I know now what the last thing was. So additionally, what we need to see still is all of the applications of these non-fungible tokens and how they can be used that haven't been developed yet. People are starting to put them on their smart TVs. They're starting to have them within their social media profiles. They're starting to put them within virtual reality galleries, and they're using them within video games. But there is so much more that can be done with them, and that's where it's really exciting.
What are the sort of, these hopeful possibilities that that are being developed? What do you think sort of the most interesting kind of lines are?
Gosh, there's so much creativity out there that every day I feel like I learn about a new project that is doing something interesting. The most promising developments include the possibility for collaboration and royalty sharing in the long term between different artists from different media. So you can have sound artists and video artists and animation artists and fine artists working together and splitting the revenues through a smart contract, which is really exciting and helps create more collaborative projects. But on a utility point of view, what's really exciting is that you could have tokens be used as a way to unlock further content. So if you can verify that someone has a certain non-fungible token in their wallet, that it opens up to another layer of interaction or deeper things, which are currently happening a bit already, but it's giving you access to a specific WhatsApp group or a specific online event or that type of thing. I think once that starts evolving further, it'll be really exciting.
And can you just tell us a little bit about, because there's been much discussed about perhaps the environmental implications of NFTs, and perhaps, are there any drawbacks or are there developments which are happening which will lessen any sort of bad effects?
No one is disputing that the traditional way that the blockchain was built, which is called proof of work, is carbon inefficient. That is a system whereby computers compete against each other, expelling a lot of energy to save the next token within the ecosystem. That's carbon inefficient, and that will soon be obsolete. However, the new systems that are being created are less like a race and more like a lottery. It's called proof of stake, where people are competing to save the next token by having one of the nodes on the network. And that's much more carbon efficient. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. However, we are still, most of the NFTs that are being sold today are still on proof of work systems, and most of the cryptocurrency that's held today is still in proof of work. So we, as an entire industry, need to move to more carbon efficient systems of using the blockchain.
Bernadine, thank you for being so clear, and we'll look for the light at the end of the tunnel on that point.
And could I just make one last point that I thought of? I think it's quite appropriate that the award is not being won by a specific NFT marketplace, NFT artist, or NFT entity, but more for the concept itself, because it is all about decentralization and empowerment through community and through working together. So it feels really appropriate that you don't choose a specific company or artist, but actually that you choose the technology as a whole. When I heard that, I thought, wow, that is really actually quite appropriate.
Bernadine, thank you so much for explaining NFTs to us. The next award is for Acquisition of the Year. This award celebrates museum acquisitions which, whether through purchase or through gift, transform permanent collections, either because they complement existing holdings or because they mark a significant change of direction. The shortlist here is selected from a much longer list that will be published in the December issue of Apollo, available this coming weekend. The shortlist is a bust of Georges Maréchal by François Girardon at the Château de Versailles, Country Dance by Guido Reni at the Galleria Borghese in Rome, 91 pieces of arms and armour from the Ronald S. Lauder collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, more than 2,000 photographs by Joseph Kudelka to the Museum of Decorative Arts in Prague, the National Gallery in Prague, the National Museum in Prague, and the Moravian Gallery in Brno. An amber chess set by Mikhail Redlin at the Museum Bursztynu in Gdansk. 40 works from the Souls Grown Deep Foundation at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and 175 works from the collection of M.J. Long and Colin St. John Wilson at Pallant House Gallery in Chichester. The winner of Acquisition of the Year goes to a collection of modern and contemporary British paintings, prints, drawings and sculptures that its new home describes as its most significant acquisition in more than 15 years. Through the Acceptance and Use scheme, it reunites these works with a previous substantial gift, so making it possible for the museum to tell an even richer story about these works and about the remarkable couple it once belonged to. The winner of this year's Acquisition of the Year is 175 works from the collection of M.J. Long and Colin St. John Wilson at Pallant House Gallery in Chichester. I'm delighted to be joined by Simon Martin, Director of Pallant House. Simon, first of all, can you tell us a bit about M.J. Long and Colin St. John Wilson and this extraordinary collection that they built up in their lifetime?
Colin St. John Wilson, who was known to his friends as Sandy, and his wife M.J. Long were extraordinary figures in British cultural history. Sandy Wilson was, of course, the architect of the British Library. He was a key figure teaching so many architects at the University of Cambridge, involved with all kinds of different projects. But of course, the British Library in many ways defined his career. And M.J. Long, who worked with him from the 1970s onwards, was American. They met at Yale University in the 70s. And she was also a key part in the building of the British Library, but had a separate career designing artist studios. And so, for example, she designed studios for Peter Blake, Paul Huxley, R.B. Kitaj, Frank Auerbach, and various others, including a redevelopment of Porthmuir Studios in St Ives and the National Maritime Museum in St Ives. And what is so remarkable about Sandy and MJ was the friendships that they had with so many of the artists they collected. Kitaj and Paolozzi were huge, close friends of both of them, and so they collected their work in great depth. But in particular, the great strength of the collection is British pop art. And so almost all of the key figures in British pop art are represented in that collection. And so, for example, strong holdings of Patrick Caulfield, Peter Blake, Richard Hamilton, various others, but also an interest in the process of how artists work, and particularly figurative artists. And so Sandy was interested in that lineage from Manet to Walter Sickert to David Bomberg, and Bomberg to artists such as Frank Auerbach. And so you have this incredibly rich history of figurative painting, really, represented in the collection.
I think there's a real sense with this acquisition of you building on relationships. You've mentioned Long and Wilson's great project with the British Library and Long's projects with artist studios in particular, but they have a particular relationship with Pallant House architecturally, and you also have an existing bequest. So can you tell us a bit about how much this means in terms of the complete collection that you now have?
Well, Sandy, together, Colin St. John Wilson, in association with Long and Kentish, designed Pallant House Gallery's extension. And that was an extension to a Grade 1 Queen Anne townhouse, and it opened in 2006. And we went on to win the Gulbenkian Prize the following year. And so there's a really strong relationship between the architecture that they designed and, of course, the collection. In 2006, they donated a huge number of works through the Art Fund, which was added to the existing collections. Really could have meant that Pallant House Gallery therefore had one of the best regional collections of modern British art. And we talk about the gallery as a collection of collections, these different private individuals who have donated or bequeathed works. And I think often those relationships are very, very long and sustained. And so you mentioned that quite a few of the works have been on loan to us, and those works have kind of converted into an acquisition. And I think it's hugely rewarding for us when you can work with collectors to build the collection in that way. And I think, the relationship with architecture, I think, is particularly strong in that, for example, a work such as Howard Hodgkin's Grantchester Road depicts the interior of the house that Sandy Wilson designed for the family in Cambridge. Another work, The Architects, which is a portrait of Sandy and MJ and their children, Harry and Sal, within the studio that MJ designed for Kittai. But he gives it a particularly art historical twist, because the dark red and the yellow lamp that you see in that painting is actually a tongue-in-cheek reference to Van Gogh's Night Cafe, which hangs at Yale University, where Sandy and MJ met. So all of these kind of connections between art and architecture come out in the work.
And, well, you very modestly described Pallant House, too modestly, I think, as a regional centre. I think most of us would think of it as the leading centre for modern British art in this country. Can you sort of say how this collection of collections that you have, the importance of the permanent collection to what you do and your future plans? Absolutely.
Our ambition, we talk about, is to be an international centre for British art from 1900 to now, to be the leading place when people think of modern British art. And acquisitions like this really help us to deliver on the significance of the collection. We now have 5,000 items, and in 2022, it will be the gallery's 40th anniversary. And I think for a gallery of our size to have built up the quality of collection that we have entirely through gifts and entirely through bequests is a remarkable story. And that's a story of private philanthropy and generosity in the kind of spirit of giving to the public. And I think that is a very particular thing. The architecture that we have, the domestic 18th century house and the new wing, is also, it evokes the home of a collector. People often say they like coming because the work feels domestic, and it's like visiting a collector in their home. And I think this is also why a lot of collectors can see their work coming to us. And I think one of the things is also that we try to change the displays and to really rotate them. in the past year with COVID, having the collection that we do has been fantastic because we had to reschedule all of our exhibitions. And actually over the winter, we were able to do an exhibition of Richard Hamilton, which showed 30 of the Richard Hamiltons that we have, together with an exhibition called Degas to Picasso, which showed 80 works by international artists, including works by Cézanne, Gino Severini, Picasso, Matisse, and others. And people don't expect a small cathedral city in the kind of home counties to have that kind of collection. And I'm always pleased that we're able to draw on that. And as we look to the future, and hopefully, the recovery from COVID, we're looking at creating a new collections centre for the gallery. So a couple of years ago, we bought the old coach house behind the gallery, and our next ambition is to create a collection centre and archive to really store these works in the best possible condition.
Simon, thank you for joining us and congratulations on winning Acquisition of the Year. Next up is the award for Apollo Artist of the Year. All of the artists on the shortlist are outstanding in their fields, and in the past 12 months they've had exhibitions that have held our attention, displayed their incredible skill, and helped us to see the world in fresh and exciting ways. The shortlist is Dawood Bey, Jasper Johns, Yayoi Kusama, Barbara Kruger, Kehinde Wiley, and Lynette Yadom Boache. The Apollo Artist of the Year is Kehinde Wiley, and here to accept the award is a representative of the artist.
Stephen Friedman Gallery are thrilled to accept Apollo's Artist of the Year Award 2021 on behalf of Kehinde Wiley. It's been extraordinary to watch this artist's career over the last few decades, and we're honoured to have worked with him since 2013. I have particularly fond memories of watching the unveiling of his portrait of President Obama in Washington in 2018. I was also lucky enough to work beside him when he was casting his models in Dalston for his series The Yellow Wallpaper for his first institutional exhibition at the William Morris Gallery in 2020. Kehinde's work has never been more poignant, more powerful, or more relevant than it is today. And I'm really thrilled to be able to share with you his collaboration with the National Gallery in London, opening next month on December 10th. Kehinde would love to be here himself to accept this award, but he is in the studio finishing his paintings and doing the final cut of his extraordinary 6-screen film installation called In Search of the Miraculous. Thank you to Apollo for awarding this year's Artist Award to Kehinde Wiley.
And finally, to Personality of the Year. The winner is a figure whose achievements have set a standard for museum architecture around the world. His individual museum projects, whether entirely new or renovations, are characterised by a respect for place coupled with a sense of possibility. The results are a wonderful reflection of what museums are, what they have been, and what they might be in the future. This is especially true of two long-awaited schemes that have been completed this year: the refurbishment of Mies van der Rohe's Neue National Gallery in Berlin and the Kunsthaus Zurich extension. Apollo's Personality of the Year is David Chipperfield. I will hand over to David, who has recorded a message for us.
Thank you, Apollo Magazine, for this award, Personality of the Year. I accept this on behalf of my teams, my partners, especially in Berlin, where we have completed the National Gallery restoration of the Neue National Gallery by Mies van der Rohe in Berlin, carried out by my Berlin office, and it was the Berlin office that also completed the extension to the Kunsthaus in Zurich. Both of these projects are complex There are projects that have a significant importance within their respective cities. Mises building is a treasured building with a turbulent history in some ways, in a turbulent city. But nevertheless, it needed careful handling. The Kunsthaus Zurich is an extraordinary institution that is respected, and Zurich itself is a city of great quality. Therefore, adding a significant public building into the urban fabric was in itself a great challenge. We were honored to work for these two wonderful institutions, and we were fortunate to work with such great clients in such a positive and constructive and collaborative process. We have worked on many museum projects now. It's always interesting, not only from an architectural point of view, but also from an institutional point of view, to understand the emphasis and priorities of different museum directors, different cities, and the priorities of different collections. It's always a rich territory for architects and gives us a great opportunity to play with the essential components of architecture, which is to create good spaces, to create a sense of orientation through that sequence of spaces, to create an environment of which allows the visitor to be both stimulated in one way, or stimulated most importantly by the works, to show the works to the best way, to create an atmosphere for the visitor. The balance required in this process of creating an architecture which is strong enough, on the one hand, to give identity and atmosphere and a sort of scenography, but respectful enough to ensure that it is the works, the art, the installations, the events, which are the stars of the show. As the late and great David Sylvester once said, rather provocatively, the artist has no greater enemy than the architect. I think in the intervening years, the profession has improved its reputation in terms of the way it's designed museums, and I hope that he wouldn't be saying the same about the projects that we finished this last year. Thank you so much again for this award, and again, I accept it on behalf of the enormous and talented teams that have worked on these projects. Thank you. Good night.
And that brings the Apollo Awards 2021 to a close. Congratulations once again to all the winners, and I hope you have enjoyed watching at home.